Ian Taylor from Travel Weekly in London. Two questions. With respect, if I had €1 for every time I've heard the argument that aviation only contributes 2% of global CO2, I'd be a very wealthy man and probably not spending my afternoon here. But I wonder how useful that argument is for the industry when at the same time I hear leaders of the European steel industry trot out exactly the same figure. Steel production in the EU only contributes 2% of emissions. Steel is vital to the economy. We have to go on producing steel and so on. And you can go around every sector and say the same thing. And by definition, no sector is responsible for a huge proportion of global emissions. So I wonder what the panel think about that. And secondly, it seems to me that the issue is less about aviation and travel's contribution now, but aviation and travel's future contribution given the rate of growth. You repeated the figures that travel grew by 6.2%, I think, last year. Aviation grows by 5% a year worldwide. At the same time, averaging over the lifetime of air travel, technological improvements are ensuring an average cut per year in CO2 emissions of about 1 to 2%. So growth in travel is outstripping the technological improvements by several percentage points a year, and that is the argument. The protests in Britain and so on most recently are all about the expansion of Heathrow, about the growth in travel, not about travel itself. So I wonder if you would address that argument. Isn't there a strong case for reining in the growth in travel? Not saying don't travel, but saying don't travel so much.
About the increases in air travel, and of course as the people travel more, there will be more airplanes in the sky, so there will be more carbon emissions from aviation. I disagree to this because more and more aircraft and engine manufacturers are very keen to make sure that the carbon emissions from their engine is low. In return, they are using new techniques and new technology. Just to give you an example, a Boeing 787 or an Airbus A350 will use nearly 24 to 26% less fuel. Of course, in return, it will also be able to get that much less carbon emissions. In addition to this, when we are doing the studies in Qatar Airways to use GTL, this again will reduce carbon emissions by double-digit figures. So when you look at the marriage between the GTL and the more fuel-efficient engines, you will see that we are going to get carbon emissions coming out of the engines, which will be closer to 50%. So no matter how much air travel will grow over the next 10 years or 20 years, the carbon emissions of future airplanes will not be greater than what it is today. So this itself is a very interesting development coming up in the aviation industry.
We actually have just 2% of the overall CO2 emissions, what I believe is not the reason for climate change. On the other side, you have to see the economic benefits, what we're doing. If we would ground all aircraft, again, I can give you another figure, if we would ground all aircraft within Europe, no aircraft in Europe, we would save 0.3% of the overall CO2 emissions. So do you believe this would be a good step for climate change, and do you believe it's good for economy and all the other things?
I believe that if I take our minds back to the Kyoto Protocol, where some countries are yet to ratify it, we all know who they are. I really would like to say that the 80-20 principle that has been established, where 80% of carbon mitigation, or rather, carbon emission mitigation measures have to be changes in our lifestyles. Each country will have to take it on to change our lifestyles. Then 20% is really the carbon credit business, that is, I acquire merit by, or rather one destination or one company or whoever acquire merit by mitigating carbon emissions and acquiring credit. Then I sell it to somebody so that somebody can sin. So that's the principle basically, on the 80-20. But there's now work being done on the 20%, but very little that has been done on the 80% of changing our lifestyles. So travel as a lifestyle business is part of our lifestyles. I read magazines that have articles on climate change, global warming, and on the other hand has got a lot of stuff on, fashion, things that one does not really need in order to sustain our lives. Even living a good standard in our lives, but to sustain it, and this is much beyond, and it's wasteful consumption. So we really need to focus on that. Travel sometimes can help us do that because there's substance, in what we do. People are seeking experiences today. When they travel, there are destinations that can offer you, your mind-body wellness, without having those luxuries that you really are seeking sometimes in our lives. So I think that is really, it's substance over, or rather, not really volume, but yield, and other things that we should be really talking about.